You call that democracy? You say that to allies in Europe? Is that global democracy? Is that NATO democracy? We're so far out, the people think probably that it cannot be as bad as it looks. It is worse than it looks. And so I think that you will see splits. If and when the West goes down, there will be no NATO. It will split because this burden will be splitting. There will be countries who say, no, we're not going that way. Spain has started. There will be others.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the WTFinance podcast. On this podcast, I have the pleasure of welcoming back a popular guest, Dr. Jan Oberg. So Jan is a sociologist, peace researcher, director of Transnational Foundation for Peace and Future Research. So Jan, thanks so much for coming back on the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me again.
No problem. Looking forward to our conversation. I think our last conversation really resonated with a lot of the audience, sort of talking about peace.
That's lovely.
Concern about what's happening in the world. So I'd be interested, we talked 6 months ago. How are you currently analyzing what we're seeing in geopolitics? It seems like things are only getting more dangerous.
Okay, let me start somewhere else, perhaps, just by saying I don't like whatever comes under the title of geopolitics, because it's old-fashioned in the sense that geography is not that important anymore, and the world is much more than political. And also those who work with geopolitics have a tendency to live in the now. Trump wrote something on his Truth Social last night, and the geopolitical commentators talk about that the next morning. What does that mean? It means that Mr. Trump and his fellow elite people are setting the agenda. We react to what we hear these bad guys, these kakistocrats are saying. By kakistocracy, I mean the least able and the least good people who are now running the Western world. Whereas I would like to say, why don't we, the people, with the experts, the intellectuals, the cultural people, why don't we set the agenda and forget about geopolitics, commentarism, so. But to your question, I think we're in a situation, I'm not the first to say that. I think the Western world is in deep crisis, first of all. Secondly, the new thing is, a relatively new thing is, that the Europeans are unable to not just basically follow the United States. Goes with, keeping quiet about the genocide in Gaza. It goes with letting the US bomb Nord Stream and destroy it to cut ties with Russia, which is not in the interest of Europe, but that was Germany who let him do it and didn't say a word. The same goes with all the wars that the United States has lost. We have always been behind these wars, Denmark being one of the worst. I happen to mention that because I was born in Denmark, and I have pain seeing what my country is doing as one of the most militarist countries in Europe. And so Europe is now facing an impossible task, which it has put itself into. Namely, the future of Europe will have to try to fight a war that is already lost in Ukraine. Reality doesn't play any role in these people's decision-making. Mind you, we just had the 18th sanctions package on Russia decided by the EU yesterday. How stupid can you be? This first 17 have only helped Russia to get a better economy. Now you continue with the 18th because reality doesn't play any role. You're running on emotionalism. Secondly, Europe will have after the war to be the only ones who help build Ukraine back again to normal. 3, Europe means also this terrible mix between NATO and the European Union. So the European Union countries, who are also NATO countries, will have to waste tremendous resources on arms production, arms export, and getting up to the most stupid measure under the sky called 5% of the gross national product for militarism. One, there's no need for it. 2, and that is my essential point, and I'm still the only one making that point. You cannot have military expenditures tied to gross national product. That is a stupidity. It is absurd. It is delusional. What you do is you make a serious, multifaceted threat analysis. What is the challenge my country or my region will have to go through the next 20, 30 years, civilian and military? What can we think about the future, and what do we need to do? Which threats are so big that we can do nothing about them? Which threats are so small that we don't have to prepare for them? And how much money do we have to do good with when it comes to security and whatever? And to me, security is not, first of all, weapons. It is the way society is structured. But we can leave that aside now. So they are into 5% of gross national product and a huge rearmament of something like 100 billion euros. And then the United States has an economic war on the country. Oh, we don't want to give weapons directly to Ukraine, but we can sell them to NATO members in Europe, and they can then send them over to Ukraine and get even more people killed in Ukraine. You know, the whole thing is bizarre, absurd, and very disgusting to look at. So the Europe is now into two Cold Wars that it could have avoided. One with Russia. Russia is not going to come back to Europe. Russia has turned away for very good reasons. They have tried for 30 years after the fall of the wall to have a good relationship with the West. We've just cheated them, we have lied to them, we've given them promises, and we've broken, such as that we would never expand NATO. And secondly, there's now a Cold War basically with the US. I mean, Trump's tariffs, the demand that Europe will pay more for NATO, which is an outdated organization that should have been closed down when the Cold War ended because the Warsaw Pact disappeared. And three, look at what he might do in Greenland. And so I will take it. You don't need more than 5,000 troops for 2 days, and you've taken over the basic administration, and Greenland will belong to America. Now, this is NATO in a nutshell. What will Europe do the day that happens? Is there any plans for it now? The answer is no. We just hope that we can please Mr. Trump, who is a choleric, unpredictable, slightly unstable, a narcissistic person. It is an absolute most dangerous period in Europe's modern history since 45. I've never seen anything like that in the 50 years I've worked with peace and conflict resolution and international affairs. Very sorry to say so. We did not have, and that is my point, we did not have to be there. We could have created a beautiful Europe. We could have, not to use Trump's misused word beautiful, but we could have created a beautiful cooperative Europe, exactly as Gorbachev suggested. A European house where we talk about problems, a European United Nations where we talk about conflicts or trust problems or whatever we have. We could have rewinded the OSCE, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, to be the main security structure or one of security structures in Europe. We could have a much lower military waste than we have today. We could have been down to 1% or less of gross national product because we would have peace and cooperation with the Russians. But the West cannot live without enemies. I'll stop there.
Yeah, you know, a lot of time back there, you sort of took that in lots of different directions. I'm sure we'll, touch on all those points later on. But I'd like to touch on what you said first, sort of the Western decline. Is that linked to this, having to always challenge upcoming countries, not always collaborating, or what else do you see? I think we talked about this on our last interview, but I'd be interested if you could sort of, go over it again, please.
Well, on the one hand, it's simply history. There is no empire that has lasted forever. I mean, and there will never be one. Empires form themselves, they increase, they get more powerful, they get to a peak point, they get arrogant, they get insensitive, they stop learning but teach all over the place. And then they begin to go down because they have to go down. Even if the rest of the world didn't exist, empires go down. It's a natural law of sociology, global sociology. Secondly, of course, over time, if we say that the American empire has lasted basically from 45, some would put it earlier, I'm not a historian, but let's say 45, the US is dominated with an empire of, 600 bases around the world and all that. And dominating NATO, which has never been about the security of Europe, but is a tool for the empire. And globally, you see how it's expanding now everywhere. Now, at some point, others will grow up. Of course, everybody will think of China, me saying that. But the whole BRICS world, the whole Belt and Road Initiative, Africa is rising. I mean, there are lots of problems. I'm not saying that everything is fine and they're all of the level of a Swedish welfare state. What I'm saying is over time, things change. And whereas we had colonies earlier, they were liberated in the 60s, 50s, and 60s. And these countries are now independent states who find out that horizontal cooperation among each other. And that's what China is spearheading with the Belt and Road Initiative and what the BRICS countries are about. Horizontal, instead of being exploited vertically, but fragmented and cheated. How many tractors how many sacks of coffee will I have to pay in my poor country in Africa to get one tractor from the Reach West? They're fed up with this. They're fed up with this. And secondly, when you look at all the wars, the rest of the world is fed up with us because we spend by far the most military expenditures, and we are the ones running most wars and having lost them all, morally and legally and politically. We're not won the hearts of anybody in Iraq or Libya or Yugoslavia. And so you can say the higher military expenditures, the more you participate in warfare. That's why it's so stupid to do 5%. And so what comes is simply, you can say, at one point, the empire goes down. You can also say it doesn't go down, but it's challenged, not threatened. Not threatened. It's challenged by the natural development of other countries and other cultures and other regions. And it is in that, change, transformation situation that the West is unable to understand the world. They think they can still dominate. Nobody wants this domination anymore. Least of all China, of course. And China is not threatening at all. China just says, don't interfere like you've done everywhere else. Don't interfere with us anymore at any time. We are shaping our own development. Don't even try. And we had 100 years where you tried. We're never going to have that happen once again. And they are big and strong. They are working twice as much as we do. They invest much more in effective society, in making a good society for the people. Look at the lowest 20% of what that will be like after Trump's big and beautiful economic law in the US. Look at what poverty is coming into Europe now, every corner. People sitting begging, there are no beggars sitting in the streets of China. So, what we should look at is, wow, somebody's doing some interesting thing, let's work with them. And the West only says, everything that is not like us is not good enough. We must fight it. It's a threat. It's a challenge. This is the most stupid reaction you can have in this world. But that is what the US and European Union is trying to do. They are already losing. For anybody looking objectively at it, not sitting in their chairs and having this groupthink where they think everything is going fine. I mean, things are not going so fine. China has gross national product growth earlier about 10% per year for 20 years or something like that. Now it's down to 4, 5, or 6 or whatever. Don't hang me on exact details. Germany has negative growth and is now going to waste all its resources on fighting Russia indirectly through Ukraine. We are acting as though we were big, stupid children who said, I want this and I want this and I'll not accept this, and cry and shout and scream. We would serve ourselves and we would create a win-win world if we worked with the rest instead of trying to confront them, dominate them, or shape them into being like us. And that is our great mistake in the Christian Western capitalist culture. We cannot understand that our time is over, and also not that we would be in a much better situation 5, 10, 50 years, 100 years from now, if we work together in a new multipolar world where cooperation is a catchword, not confrontation, where peace and conflict resolution with civilian means and talks and negotiations and diplomacy is the catchwords, not militarism, threats, bombings, etc. I've never seen anything so primitive as people who believe in bombings to solve problems. Did we solve any problems in Iran? Excuse me, this belongs to the past. It belongs to something, do we accept child molesting? Do we accept, that women are second class, can be done with whatever we want to do with them? Do we accept slavery? Do we like cannibalism? When on earth do we in the West get to the point where we say anybody who advocates wars or do wars should be thrown out? Because it's not civilization. It is not something the world can live with also when we have nuclear weapons. I'm against all nuclear weapons in all countries. But the fact that we can still say it's great statesmanship. Look what Trump did. He went in and he bombed the shit out of the areas of Iran where we think they have nuclear power facilities, etc. I say power because they don't have weapons and they don't want to have weapons, but that's another discussion. That's called statesmanship. You know, in my view, we ought to have a normative change that people who do that are thrown out, simply thrown out. They're not part of the international community anymore. Like a rapist is not a member of society anymore. Militarism is worse, much, much worse for millions of people than raping one or two people. So this ethical discussion, when do we say no to primitivity, to evil, is something that is very much on my mind, because I cannot understand that it's terrible to do a rape or look at child pornography or something like that. But it's called statesmanship when you kill millions of people and do a genocide. There's something wrong here.
Okay. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. You mentioned the 5% of NATO and how they're, as you said, increasing their militarization of 5% of GDP or GNP. So you see this as the wrong way to sort of be investing in or even spending on military. As I'm assuming you think it should be a lot less than that. And I imagine that this is going to take away, especially in Europe, from many of the other services such as healthcare and the social support net that Europe's been used to the last 30 years.
Look at the hospitals in Sweden. How long time have you got to wait? I know everything about it. You cannot have the cake and eat it too. That's the economist's first law. As well. I've never studied economy, but I think the first simple law is you cannot eat the cake and have it too afterwards. And so when you throw out this money for the military, based on no serious multidimensional analysis of any threats, it's just an assertion. Russia is a threat. Look, they have invaded Ukraine. There's no discussion about why they did it or the 30 years that happened historically before. There's no mention in the Western press among Western politicians about Obama's orchestrated regime change that led to the whole thing in 2014 in Kiev and onwards. There's no mention of the killing of 15,000 Russians and the building of the Ukrainian army and what CIA has done since 2014 and the biological weapons laboratories in Ukraine. There's nothing that happened. It was an unprovoked war, right? I mean, give me a break. This is so intellectually, it's for intellectual dwarfs. Now, my point with the 5% is one, it's 4% or more too much. But that's not what I want to say. What I want to say is the measure itself is for intellectual dwarfs. Imagine that we said, in you and my family, we said off 5% of our monthly income to buy medicine. And maybe nobody is ill. Maybe nobody in the family is going to be ill or attract something that requires that medicine. You don't tie military expenditures as the only expenditure to a percentage of your economic ability, which also means, stupidly enough, and the EU and the Western economy is bound to go down. That means there'll be less available. If you are a growing country, there will be more available for the military, numerically, not relatively, but numerically. So the long story short is, this is for the kakistocracy, for the least able, the least intelligent, and the least good people who just say, hey, any idiot can understand that we take X% of the gross national product. Now, instead of saying our government has produced a 300-page threat analysis that we now hand out to the people and organizations and political parties and the parliament, and then we have a serious discussion about what threatens our country or our region the next 20, 40 years. What can we do about various possible threats? What can we set off for the threats we have not even thought of or thought possible? You know, I'm not talking out of idealism. This is how we did threat analysis earlier. We had white books about what should be the basis of our security politics. We never had this stupid idea that NATO introduced of a percentage, and then we don't talk about what threatens us. I tell you, Russia is not going to invade, and then not able to invade and occupy any part of Europe. The Financial Times, I think it was, has calculated that with the present advance of the Russians in Ukraine, it will take 89 years before they have occupied all of Ukraine. Now, what threatens us is lack of cooperation, lack of trust. It is climate change. It is poverty. It is revolutionary movements who will turn against the West. It's terrorism. What threatens the whole world is things that Israel is doing. What are we doing about that threat? It's a threat against us. It's a threat against all the Jewish people. Every Jew in the world should be upset because Mr. Netanyahu and his government and that type of policies in the apartheid system is destroying, is harmful and hurtful to every Jew around the world. There are so many other things that threatens us, including economic crisis, being left behind technologically because the Chinese and others are booming ahead. And we talk about a non-defined, primitive, the Russians are coming. Excuse me, I'm 74. I've heard the Russians are coming. I can't say 74 years because I didn't hear it when I was a baby. But let's say from I was 5, let's say roughly 70 years. I've heard the Russians are coming and we must arm ourselves against the Russians. Give me a break, these bunch of idiots. And they're destroying our societies. They're not destroying Russia or China. We are self-destructive to the max at the moment in Europe and the United States. And that is a tragedy.
Yeah, I agree. I think the thinking that Russia will invade Europe is, as you said, it's a very silly way to look at it. They can't get through Ukraine. There's no chance they'll come to Poland.
But Anthony, you also have no media where the journalist would stop and say, excuse me, in which way do you think Russia will invade our country? I'm sitting in Sweden, right? We've had the chief of defense saying that we cannot exclude that Putin will make an isolated aggression on the island of Gotland, which is in the Baltics. And when there was an exercise down here in southern Sweden where I'm sitting in the southern town of Lund, the same man went out and said, we cannot exclude that Putin will do a partial occupation of southern Sweden, not all of Sweden, but southern Sweden. The Danish prime minister, when she went into the synagogue in Copenhagen on October 7th for memorial for the Hamas attack, she had the guts to say that if we let them, or if we don't protect ourselves, Hamas will also come to Denmark. Did any journalist ask the question? Any NATO Secretary General can stand and say, Russia is the biggest threat, China is the biggest threat, and there's not one journalist who said, could you explain to us which way it is a threat? What is your time perspective on that? And secondly, in threat in which way? Economically, politically, militarily, or what? There's nobody who are anymore asking questions critically of the Western lies, the Western narrative, and the Western propaganda. Russia is not going to invade Europe. Give me a break. It has nothing to do with serious politics. It's emotionalism, propaganda, and worse.
Yeah, and I guess the only thing it would be potential nuclear, but that's self-destructive for everyone, and that could come from either side, unfortunately.
You said nuclear?
Correct.
Yeah, but then you have the Oreshnik and other missiles, which has the same destructive capacity, but does not operate with uranium, with the radioactivity that follows. And if you are at 11 times the speed of light, then I think that's enough of a threat. We could be much safer on much lower levels. I'm not saying we should not have any military. What I am saying is offensive long-range systems should go, because nobody can trust each other. If I can kill you technologically, capability-wise, 5,000 kilometers away, If you live 5,000 kilometers away, you cannot be sure I won't do it. I can say I don't have the intention. I'm a nice guy. I won't do it. But why do you have it then? We should all have self-defense systems, short range, and something that only works the day we're invaded or somebody tries to threaten us. I used to jokingly say the symbol of that is a Chinese wall. It was not easy to get over. You see what I mean? It protected the country, but it didn't threaten anybody. And we cannot have common security, and that is the only security that exists. We cannot have common security if we can, by long-range systems and offensive deterrence, we can kill people in the millions somewhere else, conventionally or by nuclear weapons or other mass destructive weapons. We can have security if we have defensive military coupled to or co-functioning with self-sufficiency planning, good economy, non-vulnerability, civil defense, non-violence resistance in case we be occupied. You know, I've worked with these things over the years, but it is so simple. With a little brain, it's so simple to devise ideas that would make us all much safer and secure and more peaceful than what we do at the moment. It's a civilizational catastrophe that security has now, even with peace research institutes like SIPRI in Stockholm, all these guys are now talking about military security and nothing else. Weapons do not provide security and do not provide peace, because if they did, we would live in peace now, because the world has never spent so much on the military as we do and plan to do in the future. That is a great paradox, dilemma, catastrophe, civilizational malaise that we live in. We will militarize ourselves to death. We'll not militarize ourselves to peace. It's impossible.
Yeah, great point. So if we look at maybe 30 years ago, 40 years ago, there was the NATO versus sort of the Warsaw Pact. Do you see there being a shift? I guess now it's sort of BRICS, and then do you see it being US and then sort of Europe as their own separate pacts and divisions within the world? And then it seems like Europe's probably going to be the biggest loser out of those three.
Europe is going to be the biggest loser, and I honestly don't know what will happen to the United States either. The United States is a very volatile system at the moment, with enormous tensions, not only political tensions because of Trump and his tendentially fascist ways. And I mean, this is not a democracy anymore. Only fools believe this has anything to do with democracy. If you see how he operates, and even Biden operated, it has nothing to do with a decent political science definition of any democracy. He is running basically by decrees, by his showing up the white page with his huge, not too small signature, and then what he says in there, I want Greenland. I think I'm going to get it, right? I mean, you call that democracy? You say that to allies in Europe? Is that global democracy? Is that NATO democracy? We're so far out that people think probably that it cannot be as bad as it looks. It is worse than it looks. And so I think that you will see splits. If and when the West goes down, there will be no NATO. It will split, because this burden will be splitting. There will be countries who say, no, we're not going that way. Spain has started. There will be others. You cannot keep on doing what Israel and support what Israel does in Gaza. It's the most shameful thing since 1945, and what Germany did to the Jews. Those things are self-splitting, because there will be people who wake up. There will be citizens who wake up, and there already are. There will be countries waking up, and there will be NATO members who say, no, if this is immoral of our alliance, I'm out. You will see people leave NATO, in my view. The question is whether the European Union will survive, but my point is it has a double Cold War, one with Russia and one with the US. And it will lose. And the reason is that it has never been able to do what it should, according to the Lisbon Treaty. Namely, it should create peace inside and create peace in the rest of the world. It should help create peace. And the only time that the European Union did anything with one voice, as it also shall do according to its charter, the Lisbon Treaty, was that it was unanimous in destroying Yugoslavia. by recognizing Slovenia and Croatia out of an existing state, they made the war in Bosnia unavoidable. I'll not give you the long story. That'll take me half an hour to explain the history, the population dynamics, and what it meant to those left when Slovenia and Croatia had left, etc., etc. That was the most stupid and the most destructive foreign policy piece the European Union has made. And of course, the Nobel Peace Committee in Oslo gave it its Peace Prize, because it is virtually very seldom given the Peace Prize to anybody who lived up to the 3 lines that Mr. Alfred Nobel wanted to reward, namely disarmament, abolition of standing armies, peace negotiations and diplomacy. All these kinds of things is not what the Peace Committee does in the Nobel Peace Prize, but it's the most prestigious prize because nobody has read no journalist bothers to read 3 lines in his will. And they would see that most of these prizes are completely politicized. And long story short, the European Union got the Peace Prize. Look at where it is today. Probably the most militarized place outside the United States. Mr. Nobel would rotate in his grave if he saw this.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jan. So thanks so much for coming back on. I really appreciate it. We've sort of covered on all different topics. But my last question is, what is one message you want people to take away from our conversation?
Peace is possible. Peace is eminently possible. It requires a little thinking, a little public debate, and some education in schools, and a completely different culture than the Western one. We are leading the militarism. We have, what is it? NATO stands for something like 60% of the world. We have 31 countries out of 190, and we're covering something like 58, 60% of the military expenditures. And we're keeping on going upwards. So my point is, we need a peaceful revolution. We need citizens rising and saying there are alternatives. There are alternatives. There is, as I said in the beginning, we should set the agenda, not be reacting to what Trump or Macron or Mette Frederiksen or van der Leyen said yesterday. We should say, hey, we're the ones who want peace. You tell me which country does not want, people in which country do not want peace. I've been enough around the world. I've been working parts of my life in 20 conflicts and war zones. I know these people. There's nobody who wants war in this world except elites. And therefore my message is, peace is eminently possible. We just need to do something else. And we need to have a vision. You know, all these geopolitical commentators, they talk about today and yesterday. We spend in the Western culture and I say culture, civilization, far too much time on the present and the past. But we talk far too little about the future. And if people cannot envision a better, peaceful, just, welfare cooperation-oriented global system, and we don't talk about it, then these guys who are running the militarist world will win, because they will implicitly get through that there is no alternative. Tina, there is no alternative. There are only alternatives to militarism and warfare, in my view, and that is what people should begin to talk about, and forget about the threats, because Mr. Goering in Hitler's regime was the one who said, you can get people to accept warfare if we just tell them that they are threatened. We in Europe are not threatened half as much by Russia as we are by our own leaders. And I stand for that statement. Russia is not invading Europe, but we have, because of the fake threat perception that nobody actually problematized, we are stuck with a self-destructive policy, and that's a greater threat to my children, grandchildren, and grandchildren than anything Mr. Putin will be able to do. So peace is eminently possible. Peace is much better than anything else. We may not always win 100%, but we also don't win 100% in warfare. And mind you, finally, Article 1 of the UN Charter that every government has signed says that peace shall be established by peaceful means. Anybody who doesn't follow that is a criminal, according to international law and the UN Charter. But the UN turning 80 in a few months is not talked about. And that's a huge problem too, because the Charter is the finest document, the most Gandhian document governments have ever signed together. So let's get back to the basis. Law, decency, promise is a promise, and peace shall be made by peaceful means. The rest, as I said, are criminals. Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on. So if anyone wanted to find out more about your work and what you do, where would the best place for that be?
That will be to go to transnational.live. Transnational.live, that is our main homepage. And by the way, at New Year, we turn 40 years. We are now the only peace research and education, true peace and research and education organization in Scandinavia. We do not do military security. We do peace research, and peace research is to reduce, search for ways to reduce violence, as medicine is a way to reduce diseases. We are very close to medicine, but we don't share the idea of working like CIPRI now does and other peace research institutes do with only military security, which is not security. And secondly, they can go to our Substack. But if you go to transnational.live, you'll also see where we have our Substack, and that's also where we have all our videos. So thank you for asking. I'm sure I hope there will be people who begin to study, because peace is eminently possible. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'll put that in the description below, but thanks again for your time.
Thank you so much for you wanting me to be with you. That's a pleasure.
Hey everyone, thank you for listening. I really appreciate the support. If you've got value out of this, I'd really appreciate it if you could like, subscribe, or comment, good or bad feedback. I'm always open to that, but it really helps with the channel. As I said before, only about 14% of people actually subscribe to this channel. So if you were to that, it would really help. It could mean we could continue to grow. If not, thanks for watching, and see you on the next show. And you also might like this video right here. All right, thanks again.